Here with sort of chord play. This is the Chords of James Gang, and of course we're going to be talking about Joe Walsh and Tommy Bolin again. And I did put together a Joe Walsh chord play and also 3-for-all lessons for Joe and Tommy Bolin, but this lesson is going to dive into the James Gang, which are essential. The James Gang formed in Cleveland, Ohio in 1966, and eventually Joe Walsh joined forces with these guys around 1967, 1968. They recorded 3 albums together and released a live album. And then he left somewhere around 1971 to start Barnstorm and begin, his solo career. They had a lineup change after Joe, and then eventually Tommy Bolin did join in 1973. And he stuck around until around 1974. They released 2 albums. And then Tommy, of course, eventually joined forces with Deep Purple. So regardless of which era you prefer, either Joe Walsh or Tommy Bolin, there's something great to gain from, diving into James Gang. And their music's really inspiring. There's lots of riffs and solos and slide and all kinds of stuff going on. So they're a great band. So regardless of which area you prefer, James Gang kicks ass. For the opening, that's a very obscure James Gang song. That's Country Fever. And that song actually appears on the soundtrack to the 1971 film Zachariah, which Zachariah was a flop at the box office. It did not do well. And I actually did some research, before I did this episode. I actually found Zachariah on YouTube and watched it. It's a very strange electric western, as they dubbed it or billed it. But it's a western, but James Gang is in it. Country Joe and the Fish and Elvin Jones and all these people. And there's a scene in this bar room where James Gang is literally playing Country Fever. I mean, they're not really playing it. They're just like pretending they're playing it. And then Elvin Jones gets called out by this gunslinger. Elvin Jones is a jazz, legend, a jazz drum legend. And he comes out from behind this, booth or whatever and gets in a gunfight. Elvin shoots this guy dead. And then he takes over the drum kit and starts playing this crazy jazz drum solo. And I was like, what kind of movie is this? He just killed somebody and then played a drum solo. So if you're curious, it is on the soundtrack from that film. You can find that film on YouTube. I found multiple versions of it. And it's also on the 2000 Greatest Hits, the James Gang Greatest Hits from the year 2000. For Country Fever, it basically starts like this, and I'm hitting this partial, A minor 7. You could also play with this back in open position, kind of based around an A power chord, but I think Joe's actually doing it this way. And it starts with the bass, and the guitar just gradually, starts building with the bass. And you're just playing a single A there in the beginning like this. And right there you're literally just sliding this partial C to D. And think of all those riffs we've seen from, Kiss and Ted Nugent and Cinderella and Tesla and all these bands where we're playing these partial chords, in the key of A, technically. But there we're doing... You're kind of sliding on that fourth, repeat or whatever, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's basically the verse, and then it starts mixing up like this. And there you're basically sliding that partial C to D, and then the next time you're doing D, C to that open G with the open strings. And then right there you've got this killer single note riff. So slowly it's like this. A little faster. And it's all about the timing right there, because it's really quirky, but it does lock right into the time. Right there, you're doing this descending, like A blues kind of run. Just to end on that A right there. And eventually it moves into some other chords there. But really cool song, totally rocking out too. I love that riff. Okay, up next is the very obscure Funk 48, which is from James Gang's first album, Yer Album, which is right there on the wall, and it's something like this. Something like that, and it's this really funky kind of partial chord riff, and we're starting right here. So right there, you're hammering onto that partial A, and then you're doing this, you know, minor to major third there, that C to C sharp, and then a partial D, and then you're basically bending that 7th fret double stop on the G and the B, just smearing it, which has this really weird sound. And then do it again. And then right there you're doing that little fill. And then do it all over again. And eventually it starts doing that busier fill. And then eventually it starts doing this. Next up is the timeless Funk 49 from the Rides Again album, something like this. So with that intro part, it's just a lead, really, and you're doing... So you're literally bending that G up, catching that bending that D up, catching that G note with your pinky, and then releasing that D bend like this. And then you're going to catch that C note and bend that up, and it's just kind of smeared like this. And then you literally hear this kind of pre-bend, a whole step, and then you're going to release it ever so slightly, and then you're going to pick it again and release it basically to a half step. Pick it again, release it to a quarter step, and then you're going to do this little pull-off run like this. Something like that. And that's just the the open, that 7th fret, 5th fret to the open G there, and then do the same thing on the D string. And then right there you've got this partial, you know, it's basically moving into an A7, but you're changing that minor to major third, you know, that C to C sharp. And you're doing that partial A7, also grabbing that partial D right there. And then right there you're going to grab this partial D and you're adding that 70s inversion. That's technically part of a G chord, but you're adding it like that. And at the very end you're playing that open A. So that riff, really slow. Just keeps going. And eventually you hear that descending, you know, pentatonic run, and it's really just this position of A minor pentatonic. So you're starting on that A, and then ending on that G to A right there. Power chord, and then do it again, and then just end on that A note, and repeat that again, and then move everything you did up a whole step. Now go to B, so there's B minor pentatonic waiting right here, and a B power chord, and do it again, and end on that B note. And right there at the end of that riff, I'm actually playing a partial E minor 7. I've seen this written like an E7 sharp 9, like the Hendrix chord, but I think Joe's just playing E minor 7 right there. And then it goes right back into that funky A riff. Next up is a song from the Tommy Bolin-era, and this is the song "The Devil Is Singing Our Song" from the album Bang, and it's this slinky kind of blues riff. Really cool, like this. Something like that. And it's basically playing with like A blues. You know, as far as that riff's concerned, like this. Because you're starting on that flat 5, that E flat. So grab that E flat to E and then roll over to that A. So it's a melodic, you know, single note riff. And then right there, you just go to an A power chord, then you're going to pick through this D5, and then it's like a C, or like a partial C, or like a C9, I guess, C sus2. And then do it again. The second time you're going to go back to that D chord, and then the verse starts and you just loop that riff. And eventually it starts doing the same riff riff, just a little bit louder with more gain or distortion. Next up is another song from Tommy Bolin-era with the band, and this is Head Above Water, the last track on the album Miami. And I honestly have no idea why this song wasn't a super big hit. It might have something to do with the fact that Tommy left the James Gang, so maybe they didn't push this as a single. But this song should have been a hit. It's very basic as far as the guitar part, but killer song. Something like this. Basic. It's got that descending kind of Beatles, Led Zeppelin kind of thing going with that D major, and you're really just kind of scatter strumming through it. That's what I'm calling it, scatter strumming. That's a new term. Because you're really just kind of scattering through that chord, or you're just kind of fleshing it out. You're not really strumming the full chord, you're also not picking through it. You're kind of doing like a mix and match. And then you're moving to that, so that's basically C6. You could also think of that as like a D over C right there. Like D5 over C, and then a G over B right here, and then a G over B flat right there. So just walking through that. Tommy starts doing that D major and D sus4 right there, just this little kind of flutter or movement. And it's a great song, and I'm really surprised it wasn't a hit, and I think somebody should cover that song because the vocal performance and lyrics and just the whole tune. Very basic, but a great song. Okay, next up is The Bomber from the Rides Again album, and actually Steve Lukather did a great cover of this on his Candyman album. But The Bomber is awesome, like this. Sum those parts up, but the first part's like this, and you're really just sliding this single D to an E with the low E open, and it has this huge sound. And then a G power chord to A. And after you do that slide again, you're actually going to play E major and just slide it off. And then do it again. Starts, just slide D5 to E5, and then D5 to A right there. And you want to keep sliding that E major chord. The chorus right here, there's basically like a Pete Townsend approved E5. So you're basically doing a one finger bar right there, but you're muting the G. So it's the bottom 3 strings and also the B and the high E with no third, no G string. And then D5 to A. And it's D5 to A5. And then you're kind of doing this AC/DC almost kind of power chord riff. So it's E to D, and then D, A, D, A, D, E, like this. Again. here's the song Collage, which is from Yer Album, and you can see I've switched to an acoustic guitar. We're also in an odd tuning. So we're in dad tuning, not dad-gad, dad. So it's D-A-D, D-A-D, which is very unusual, but really cool, like open tuning. And Collage is another like James Gang song. I don't understand how this wasn't a massive hit because it's a great tune. But Collage is something like this. So we're basically in dad tuning, which is going to produce a D5 when you strum the strings open. And the song actually begins with this reverse rake like this. So just play the strings open, and then he's hitting some harmonics there, the 12th fret to the 5th fret to the 7th fret. And it's kind of those bottom 4 strings. Don't really worry about the top strings. Something like that. And then he starts doing this open string kind of rhythm. Drop D fans out there, check out that riff, right? And this is from, James Gang's first album, so this is really early. You gotta think how pioneering that right there is. And then he starts doing this. So it's basically like a D minor, and we're really just kind of moving down. Keep in mind we're in dad tuning, so those shapes are going to be a little funky because that's D minor, technically, that first one, when you're holding that 7th and 8th fret right there, and then you're just moving down. And then right here, since we're in dad tuning, this is going to basically function like a G sus2, and then we're adding this B note, which is going to change it to G major. So think of those stretchy, sus2 shapes, but he's playing it like this. And like I said, that's kind of like G sus2, but in this tuning, it's like that. And then he's adding that B note. It moves from that G, it's going to go down to F sus2. Really cool song, and definitely overlooked and nearly forgotten, but check out Collage, great song. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with the Chords of James Gang, and definitely a very important and influential band, and they just kind of like exploded, and then Joe Walsh left, and then they tried to regather, what they were doing, and they had a little trouble, and then eventually Tommy Bolin jumped in. And then, of course, he left and joined Deep Purple. And then I think they eventually did break up. I think like by 1978 or something like that, they were done. But very important band, often overlooked. Most people just think of songs like Walk Away or Funk 49, which are great. But they have a lot of kind of hidden music. If you start digging around, it's like, man, how come this wasn't popular? And how come they don't play this on the radio? Because it's great music. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to my lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content material. Thank you.